Welcome back to the Gen Z Speaks podcast. With us today, as always, a special guest. Introduce yourself, Imam Sahib.
I gotta introduce myself?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You get the opportunity to say whatever you want.
All right, my name is Mahmood Kauser. I'm an Imam here in Southern California, the largest mosque in SoCal, actually. I became an Imam in 2012 after 7 years of a seminary school in Canada. Then I got a chance to serve in Eastern Africa for about 6 months. Then I served in the Pacific Islands as a missionary for about 5 years. I was married and had my daughter there as well. And then I moved to New York City and I served there as about 4 or 5 mosques for about 5 years until I moved here 2 years ago. So I've had a chance to see people convert and things like that. Yeah.
You were born and raised in Southern California, right?
I was actually born in New York City, but I was 3 years old. So basically raised in California. Absolutely. Yeah.
Around the Chino area.
In Chino, yeah.
What made you want to be an imam?
Good question. A whole host of reasons. One of them, I think, that kind of connects to the Chino area which is when 9/11 happened. I remember, I was in high school. It was obviously a terrible day. The news of it. I'm a New Yorker in that sense, right? I was born there. So just knowing that my own citizens, my own friends, people have died in this tragic scenario. So that morning, I remember my dad, everybody was panicking. And my dad's initial reaction was that people are going to react the way they do back home, which means they're going to target you're a Muslim, obviously. So don't go to school today. And so I was like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen, And then the next thing he did was they actually went and for the first time ever, they actually closed the gate of the mosque. And then they put somebody on security there just to make sure, just in case, God forbid, somebody reacts, comes and attacks the mosque or whatever. And then I remember just like an hour or two later or so, somebody came and started banging on the gate. And obviously we were alarmed. My father went out and we found it was actually one of our neighbors. And when we approached closer, we're like, what's the issue? And the neighbor said, I've been here for the last 20 years or so, and this gate has never been closed. You guys are the most peaceful people on earth. You have no reason to close your gate today. Open it. I'll sit on security. Nobody will bother you.
Wow.
So that was a moment of change for me. One is obviously I love America. I'm an American. Just to see an American take that step forward. And number two, it was he knows that my faith has nothing to do with this. And I had an urge, I guess, a spark that kind of, lit. Well, I want the rest of the world to be like this guy who knows what I really believe. Because, they're blaming my faith and, people from back home to do this tragedy. Right. But it had nothing to do with my faith. I know I'm a peaceful Muslim, and there's not just peaceful Muslim. Islam is peace, right? So for him to blame, so him to know was what I felt like every American should be able to know what Islam really stands for. So that was one of the main reasons, I think, that kind of led me in this path. Obviously, there's a whole host of other reasons. But
well, that's a great anecdote.
Yeah. I asked that question because you were raised in America.
Yeah.
And our culture is very secular, right? And in this culture, somebody wanting to pursue a spiritual path is unique, and it's very rare that happens.
Sure.
And in our sect, you had to go to school for 7 years after high school. So what was that like to get formal training in how to be an imam?
You have to actually be able to get in. So luckily they had just opened one in Canada just 3 years prior to me applying. And because it was new, I was able to, have the interview and so on and so forth and get in. And then, like you said, it's 7 years. And that's 7 years of, if you pass that final, it's called a Shahid exam. It's kind of like the bar exam. It's every single subject. There's 13 of them. Of every single subject, every single year for 7 years is in that one comprehensive exam.
Oh, wow. What are the different subjects? I'm curious.
So, for example, history of Islam or history in general, comparative study of religions. You have Arabic, you have Urdu. And then you have jurisprudence and a whole host of other topics as well. But there's 12 or 13. And memorization is another one. Hadith, which are the sayings of the Holy Prophet, is another one. So we had to go through all that, memorize, and so on and so forth. But I think our favorite subject was comparative study of religion. So we study the Bible in depth. I have a Bible of my own, and I can flip through it. I enjoy reading it myself, especially when I interact with a Christian. I can show them the journey of Islam from the Bible. Why I believe what I believe from the Bible alone. I don't need a Quran. I don't need anything else. Everything is there because that's actually what the Holy Quran says, that there's guidance and light in the Bible. You just got to find it. You just got to have the eyes, the spiritual eyes to see it.
I'm so happy we have you because in a previous podcast we had a Christian on.
Okay.
And I might have said something inaccurate because I went home afterwards and I researched it more. We had a guest on, and we were talking about the accuracy of the Bible. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
I told him that we believe Bible to be the word of God. Like we believe it's an authentic book, but somehow down the line, the Bible got corrupted.
Okay.
Now, is that accurate to say or not?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
That's what we believe. Again, a Christian may not agree with you.
Right.
But the way we give them a response is that every aspect of the Bible, and when you say Bible, actually, the Holy Quran kind of categorizes it. There's 3 portions of today's Bible that we believe is authentic from God. One is the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Then there's Injil, which is the Gospels. That's the first 4 books of the New Testament. And then you have Zabur, which is Psalms, which is a particular portion. But to your point, we believe that when it was revealed or when it was inspired or when people heard about it, when Moses spoke, for example, that was from God. But it was never safeguarded the way a Holy Quran, for example, was promised to be safeguarded. So yes, there was a corruption over time. Just human beings, so on and so forth. And to give you one example of that, obviously there's inaccuracies found in the Bible of just narrations. It'll say there's 6 horses in the next story. It'll say, no, there's 5, so on and so forth. There's other inaccuracies between the Gospels, for example, Jesus' story. In some, there's 100 pounds of medicine they're taking. In other, there isn't. Or in 2 books, it doesn't even mention that he went to heaven. So there are differences. There are discrepancies, so to speak. And then the third part of it is that there are some authors of the Bible. Because remember, for example, the book of Hebrews or the book of John. It says it's the book of God. It doesn't say the book of God, right? It says the book of John, book of Hebrews. Some of those authors are unknown. Nobody knows who they are. Even till this day, they don't know who they are. So for them to say that these are authentic from God and they've lasted the test of time is a big claim to make. But there are translations, countless translations of the Bible. So our belief, like you said, is that the Bible was originally from God and there is light and guidance in it, but it has been corrupted over time through people and their interpolation of it. And so if he was offended by it, it makes sense. That's fine. That's his stance. But
right. I just wanted to make sure because like when people say that a book was somehow, there's some inaccuracies, we're not saying that by default, the Bible is wrong.
No,
the Bible has some of the most beautiful teachings that we agree upon, right?
Absolutely, 100%.
In its purest form, it was the Word of God.
Yep.
But also, and my other question to you is, was the Bible supposed to be global? Because right, the Holy Quran, according to Muslims, and I'm happy I have you here to fact check me.
Yeah, sure.
Because the Holy Quran, what we believe as Muslims, is supposed to be the final book, and it's a book for all of humanity, not just a specific region.
Right.
So when Bible was originally sent down, was it sent down for a specific group of people, or was it supposed to be global?
Perfect. So there's various examples I can give you, but basically, in a nutshell, the way we believe it is that when Adam came, Adam was the very first prophet in this line of prophethood. But when he came to a people who lived in a cave, for example. They were hunter-gatherers. They didn't have the concept of community. They lived more like the way wild dogs do, where they're kind of having relations with various other people with no regard. So there were 3 commandments that Adam was given, according to the Holy Quran. He was given the commandment that you should wear clothing, have a sense of shame and that kind of honor. Number 2, institute marriage, which if you look back in history, we don't even know when marriage started. But according to Islam, it started at the time of Adam. And the third was to leave the caves and live in a community, meaning assign work. You do X, Y, and Z, and I'll do X, Y, and Z, and I'll do X, Y, and Z. And the reason I give you this background is because according to Islam is that each one of these prophets was just building up, as humans got smarter, the more commandments came from God. As we became more civilized, the more God gave us more civilized commands and guided us more, right? And so Adam, and it keeps going, then we get Noah, then you got Abraham, then you got Moses, then you have Jesus. And each one of them, when they came, for example, Moses, we all know that he went to Pharaoh and he said, "Let my people go." Very famous quote. He didn't say, "Let the whole world go." He didn't say, "Pharaoh, come with me." It was a very clear distinction that Pharaoh, you and your people stay here. I'm going to take my people. That means his message was for a specific people. Similarly with Jesus, look at his example. He kept saying, "I'm here for the Jews. I'm not here for the Romans. Forget them." In fact, He went to the extent, he said, I have not come but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. What does that mean? The house of Israel means the 12 tribes of the Jews, 10 of which had moved because of Nebuchadnezzar, and there was some destruction prior to Jesus coming. They had scattered. Nobody knows where they are even till this day. They're unknown. Mormons believe they came to America. Others believe they went to India. There's variations there, but they're still unknown till this day. There are only 2 tribes that stayed in Palestine. That was Judah and Benjamin. And these were the 2 tribes that Jesus spoke to initially. And when he was speaking to them, we know what they did. They put him on the cross, right? They doubted his prophethood. They didn't agree with his message. And so there Jesus responded basically saying, I'm not here for you. I have not come but for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And many times he said, don't go into the Gentiles. Don't throw, or is it, stones or, like basically jewels in front of the swine. He referred to anybody who was a Israelite was basically to him a Gentile or a swine. That means that anybody who's currently a Christian, majority of them, are not in the category that Jesus himself spoke about. Do you get my sense? So every time he preached, he always said, preach to only the Jews, don't go outside of that. That was a consistent theme in Jesus' words.
Interesting.
And then how did it proliferate from there?
Good. So then we have, after Jesus, again, went on the crucifixion, then he was no longer there. He appointed Peter as his successor. And when Peter started to build up his community, again, it was only just a handful of people, Paul came, who was a Roman, and said that I saw Jesus in a dream. And as a result of this dream, I'm also a disciple. And then he said, I believe everything Jesus said to you is wrong. Let's do what the version of Christianity I know. And so it was through Paul that Christianity grew and expanded to whatever version it has today, until, again, many, many years later, the Roman Empire eventually embraced it. But a lot of the new ideas, for example, not having circumcision, or being okay to eat certain things, or not looking at the Old Testament, all of that was from Paul. Peter never subscribed to any of that. Just to give you an example, this is all historical stuff. It's not a Muslim perspective. There's a historical perspective. This is really what happened. So.
In your one other thing that we've talked with some of the Christian guests that have come on is the belief in the life of the hereafter.
Okay.
And I asked 2 of the Christian guests that came on, they're like, just like how we believe, that the Bible got corrupted somehow, it was in its purest form. And to some Christians that might be offensive, and I understand that, right? But that's just a religious belief. To me, then there's some beliefs in Christianity that some Muslims might construe as offensive. For example, like a lot of Christians believe if you don't believe in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you can't go to heaven, regardless of whatever it is that you do.
Correct.
And again, that's their theological belief, right? Like they're not bad people for believing that. That's just what they believe, just like we have our beliefs, right? And so what is Islam's perspective on the hereafter? Because when the Christian guest came on the podcast and I was like, if you were to ask me the question of if you'll go to heaven or hell, I'll tell you I don't know. Because as Muslims, we believe for the most part that it's up to God. You can even be Christian and technically still go to heaven, right?
Sure. Why
So
not?
that's right? You don't. It doesn't matter what religion you belong to.
Correct. But there's a caveat there. Obviously, I'm gonna explain. So
put your mic a little bit closer.
Sorry. So 2 things. One is, in Islam, we believe hell is not forever. I remember I was in high school. I shared this with my friend, and he was like, "That's profound." I was like, "That's not. For me, it's normal. I grew up with this." The idea that hell is forever is non-existent in Islam. In fact, there's a famous saying of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What he basically says is that there'll be a day when the gates of heaven will just be kind of like rocking because of the wind. I mean, with all of hell, the gates of hell will be rocking as if they're empty because there's nobody in them anymore. Eventually, everybody will go to heaven. Now, why is that? What's the background of that? We believe hell is like a hospital. The best way to understand our interpretation of hell is, imagine for a moment if you and I were to take 2 different paths. You would take the path of exercise, okay? You're going to eat well. You're going to wake up early in the morning, right? You're going to almost put yourself through hell, right?
Right.
Whereas I decide, no, you know what? I'm going to enjoy life. I'm going to have donuts all day long, right? I'm going to enjoy just a soda every day, and that's all I'm going to eat. I don't care. What'll happen? You will go through hell now, but you'll have a longer, fruitful life. You'll enjoy heaven later, right? Whereas I'll enjoy heaven now, but I'm going to have hell later.
Mm.
And what'll that hell look like? That hell will look like I'm gonna get probably diabetes, right? Some heart disease.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be in the hospital in and out, popping pills, right? Obese, a whole host of things. And my body will not be able to recover from my actions of so many years unless I go through some rigorous and maybe I've a host of other issues, right? So we believe that your soul currently, if I backbite, I'm damaging my soul. And it may not happen right away. I may not feel it right away, but it's slowly and gradually I'm destroying my soul to such an extent where now when I pass away, when I die, I go before God, and he's the angels examine me. They look at my soul and they're like, look at this. The thing's all broken up. Guess what? You have to go to hell. What is hell? Hell is a hospital. Today, if you think about it, our hospitals are the most advanced thing ever, right? Our hospitals are the nicest, you get the nicest food, right? You get TV, you get a nice place to live. But nobody would willingly want to go to a hospital because it literally feels like hell. So that's exactly how we interpret our hell for the next life.
Unless somebody has really good insurance.
Yeah.
Even
then, you'd be surprised. Even then, nobody, even if somebody's really rich, nobody wants to go to the hospital.
Right.
They'll choose anything else. You know what I mean? But the hospital is the worst place to be. And so that's how we understand it. That the only reason bodies, or let's say our spiritual bodies, would go to a hell and why they would eventually leave is because they're going to have to go through that repair. And everybody can be repaired by God. It's just that who would choose, for example, a life of, fornication and adultery where they have STDs and say, I would love to have gonorrhea. Who cares if I have gonorrhea, right? Nobody would say that realistically. That I'm okay with gonorrhea. I'm okay with the treatment of it. Because everybody would be like, why would you want that life? That's the same thing we say now as spiritually. Why would you want your spiritual body to be destroyed and have to get repaired? Wouldn't you want to put yourself through hell now where you wake up early and you pray, where you're kind to people, where you're helping one another, you're not backbiting? Wouldn't you just want to do that now so that you have a more fruitful and enjoyable life? And that's really what it boils down to in terms of our interpretation of hell.
Interesting.
And so that is a pretty universal term, whether you're a Muslim or Christian or Jew or...
This is a Muslim belief.
Muslim belief, yeah.
Yeah, very.
Do you guys hold this belief with, I don't know, Christians or Jewish
people?
Oh,
okay, yeah. So to add to that, exactly. Okay, to your point. Yeah. The other part of it is that we strongly believe that I cannot dictate who's going to heaven or hell. I cannot. He cannot. Nobody can. God decides based on the circumstance of that person. And what that means is, let's say Ibrahim, for example, is on an island, isolated island. And the only thing that ever arrived to him, and I've lived on islands, so I know how this works, where if anything arrived to him, only thing arrived to him is Christianity. God will judge him based on the understanding of Christianity that he has, and if he's lived his life to the best Christian that he possibly could. Because he'll be judged based on what he knows.
Right.
Now, if I've went to him and I've introduced to him Islam, like genuinely, not I've introduced him, I'll walk away, which I've had experience with some Christians as well. They'll walk up to me and say, I've given you the Christ, and they'll walk away. You're going to hell now. I'm like, wait, what? No, slow down here. Yeah. But I'm saying if I genuinely tried and you've genuinely understood it, but then you say, no, I don't want it. I disbelieve in whatever you're saying, then God will judge you based on that you haven't embraced Islam. You know what I mean? But that burden is on our shoulder as a Muslim to make sure I convey that message. It's not on your shoulder. Obviously, your shoulder, if you're finding God and pursuing God, you should look for him. But genuinely, every single person will be judged based on their own circumstance. Period. Hands down.
And tell me if I'm mistaken again, but at the end of the day, even after heaven and hell, we believe the ultimate final state of human souls is heaven, right? Like at the end of the day, eventually everybody will go to heaven.
Correct. Because that's the end goal. The end goal, according to the hadith or the sayings of the Holy Prophet, on whom be peace was that we have been created so that we can recognize our Creator. That's why we were created. What that means, though, is a bigger purpose here that exists. And so in order for us to achieve that bigger purpose, we have to eventually be in the company of God. Now, our version of heaven is not like what everybody else thinks that they read. Just everybody's chilling and relaxing and, some nice, milk rivers and whatnot. What we believe is that even in heaven, you'll be doing work because we are created to enjoy life when we're working, when we're doing something, we have action. Sitting around all day long, you actually get exhausted. You get mentally, unstable and so many other things. So we believe that when you go to heaven, there are actually degrees in heaven that you'll also exist. The different 7 heavens, for example. And then within heaven, you'll be able to go up and you'll be able to get closer and there's still more progress at hand.
Hmm.
This is just the initial test to get us into heaven.
And this is in the Quran. It says
This is in the this is all over the Holy
Okay.
Quran and the Holy Prophet. Yeah, saying.
So let's say like I go to heaven somehow and
Yeah.
end up there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somehow, God forbid, I end up there. I go on level 4, right?
Okay.
And if I keep messing up, can I go to like can my level be lowered? Is that
So
possible?
the craziest thing is I can't tell you. That's the beauty of it, right?
Right.
I'm not gonna profess to know, but from our spiritual guides, in the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, for example, they have explained that, for example, one thing that they've explained is that your physical body, when you die, it stays here, and your soul becomes your new body, and that soul has within it another soul that will be born. Okay, and within that soul, again, you'll get to start fresh, and you get to start from there. But because your current soul becomes the body, that's why they say you have a white sheet, like a beautiful body, but it's been damaged, so now it looks black or dirty or messed up. That's exactly why if your soul is damaged, you'll have that very clearly apparent in the next life. But beyond that, once we enter, we believe there'll be a day of judgment. God will decide where we're going to be, who we're going to be with. And then beyond that, we have no idea what's in store for us. It's up to God. I haven't been there. I haven't come back and let you know.
So I do have a question. Going back to like the hospital anecdote. So you go to hell and then you're in this hospital of hell, right?
Sure.
And does God then, in according to Muslim, does God then touch the person in hell to try to fix them? Or how does the repair happen?
Same way a hospital currently does it, right? Where a doctor will come and prescribe whatever it is. You need therapy, you need physical, whatever it is. Again, I'm just giving you scenarios. We don't really know, but the idea behind our belief of it is that when you go there, because of backbiting, you have a certain damage, there's going to be a certain remedy for it. Okay. Just like in this life. For example, many of us will commit atrocities or just commit sin. Even in this life, we believe, okay, if you fast, for example, you can start remedying that body, that same spiritual body. If you pray early in the morning or you give charity or whatever those acts are that you can do, you can start repairing the body now. Right. So in the same way, there may be some exercise or something there that exists in the next life.
And this would happen before or after Judgment Day? After Judgment Day.
So what we believe is that when you pass away, you go into what is like a purgatory.
Okay. You guys do believe in purgatory.
So we do believe in purgatory.
Okay.
The only difference is that when you pass away, purgatory is like a window, and you actually see where you're destined to go, heaven or hell. Obviously, God still has the decision, but based on your condition, it'll show you. Like if you're going to hell, it'll show you you're going to hell, and whatever that time is of purgatory, you'll notice it, and you'll be like, "Oh, I'm going to hell. I'm not in it yet, but I'm going there." And then, of course, Day of Judgment happens, and that time, God can forgive anybody for any reason. He's the master that day. So that's another difference between Christianity and Islam. And this is actually the key difference. Most people don't know this. One of the biggest differences between Christianity and Islam is what is God's role on Day of Judgment? I'll explain. Christianity believes that God is a judge, which means that if you've ever told a lie, God has to punish you. He's a judge. He's bound by certain laws.
Okay.
And because he has to punish you over a single lie, this is why Christianity believes that Jesus, God's Son, had to come to the world to die for your sins. Otherwise, God couldn't forgive you. So there's a limitation on God's power. And that's why the entire story of Adam committing the first sin, Jesus coming to die for your sins, is all based on this idea that God is a judge. And he's bound by the laws that he created. We believe God is a master. He's not bound by any laws. And as a result, you don't need Adam to commit a sin. It doesn't transfer from person to person. You don't need Jesus to come and die for anybody's sins because God is a master. He can see you. He can say, okay, you did terrible crimes, or you were a sinner, but you were so kind to Ibrahim, for example. You fulfilled your responsibility as a friend. God can say, I forgive you. He has the ability to do it.
I understand.
Yeah.
What? So I'm really curious. I didn't know this until now, actually. The purgatory idea.
I
should have known
on a podcast before.
Yeah. And I think I said we don't believe in purgatory, right? Okay, so
it.
thank God we have you here to clear that up.
No, you're good.
So
you believe whatever you want to believe.
No, I don't want to spread disinformation. So let's say somebody dies tomorrow. He's a Muslim. So how long to the person who died, how long does that process feel like until the day of judgment?
Time is created for this dimension that we're in.
Okay.
They will not feel any sense of time.
Interesting.
It may be a day or 10 minutes, whatever. We don't know. But it won't feel like the way it does for you and I. And there are people technically in purgatory at this current moment.
Because one thing, I've been reading the translation of the Holy Quran more, and one thing God says repeatedly is, I'm giving you all these ideas of heaven and hell, but you'll never really understand it. Right. It's beyond your comprehension. Correct. Like, I can give you analogies, right? Correct. Like he does. Correct. Gardens and whatnot, but we still can't fathom it. So the purgatory, I'm assuming, has the same idea where we can't really fathom what it entails. Correct.
But the idea here is that whatever God describes in the Holy Quran about heaven, he's basically saying the enjoyment that you would feel, you know, being able to drink a nice cold glass of milk in a hot day, that enjoyment is what you'll feel in heaven. It's not that there'll actually be milk and there'll actually, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just describing whatever those pleasures that you feel, you'll feel that pleasure again in heaven.
And I didn't know that in heaven you'll still have obstacles. So it's not like utopia.
Yeah, there's action. You're not just sitting around. Well, so the thing is, I'll give you an example. If you were to take a horse and tie him to a tree, after 2 days, he'll be fine. He's tied to a tree. But take you and I and tie him to a tree, they'll lose their mind, right? They're just sitting there, not doing anything. It's because we're social animals, right? We're created to be able to stay busy, doing something, some progress in our life. And so our version of heaven is the same. You're not just sitting around. You're doing something, something productive, something engaging, something that'll keep us, you know, excelling in one way or the other.
And in each one of the levels, it progressively gets more difficult?
We're not sure, but we know that the Holy Prophet Muhammad, for example, on whom be peace, is at the highest level. He's the closest to God, right? And then other prophets are in different levels. Okay. So some prophets are at 4th level and 5th level, so on and so forth. So they've done whatever they could in this life, and that's why they're in that particular level.
I talked to Imam about this. I was like, imagine one day we are in heaven, right? And it ends up being the exact same place that we are right now.
That would be pretty intense.
Is that possible technically?
I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You'll never know.
That would be pretty intense, huh?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Something, though, that is also interesting to me is in the Quran, it talks about it's not just life after death. It's also in the current life. Like you can have heaven and hell, and God can punish you or award you accordingly. And so
in this life,
like in the current life we're living, like there's heaven and hell for people. And so what is that? What are the nuances behind that perspective?
So good point. Actually, in Islam, we strongly push this idea that heaven and hell actually does start here. What that means is that, for example, there's a verse in the Quran that says, if you're blind in this life, you'll be blind in the next. And what it means is that not physical blindness, but spiritual. If you're spiritually blind, you haven't seen God, you haven't witnessed God, you haven't experienced God, don't expect that you die tomorrow and all of a sudden you're looking at God. It's not going to happen.
Okay.
You got to find heaven in this life, on this earth first. Once you find God and you do that, that exercise, then you can guarantee to enter the next life and be able to see God. So it's kind of an eye-opener for all of us that we should be striving to find God because that's our purpose in life. And if we were able to find him, guess what? We can enjoy that in the next life as well. But if we don't, and we're living like as if we're in heaven in this earth and we're not ignoring the real heaven, we're enjoying life, doing fornication and whatnot, we're going to miss out on that spiritual sight. And then the next life won't be as enjoyable. So it is really key to focus on heaven and hell in this very life. And obviously when we're young, this is a Gen Z podcast, so when we're young, we ignore that. We don't even think about death. That's not even, it's far away from us, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess the only thing Islam reminds people who are young, think about death. Death can come on anybody at any time. And if death were to come, and actually I spoke to somebody recently, he had some job interview or something like that. I can't remember what it was. But they had an exercise where they sat everybody down and they said, okay, take out a paper and pen.
Yeah.
And write down what you would like to see on your tombstone. Just process that.
Wow.
And then whatever that is, that'll be what you gave, what you've done in this life. What is that you want to see on there, right? And if you go back and look at a graveyard, for example, you'll see it says father, husband, but those things are not what we're focusing on, right? We're focused on career.
Yeah.
It's not going to say I'm a doctor of so-and-so.
They had him do this for a job interview?
Yeah, something.
What kind of job was he applying for?
I don't remember what the context
was. A mortuary?
It was a good idea. I know, right? It was a good idea. I don't know what the context was, but yeah.
Right.
To that point.
I like that we have those set of beliefs because that makes you accountable for everything you do. So everything matters. Every single deed you do, every single action you have matters. And to your point about being spiritual in your 20s when you're young,
Yeah.
when you're like in our generation, my grandma has this saying. She always says, everybody tries to find God when they're older.
Yeah.
Like everybody has, like when they're older, right? They become more spiritual
Yep.
because death is coming.
Yep.
But the biggest test
Yep.
is when you're young, you become more spiritual
Yep.
and you find God, because that's the age where nobody is
Yep.
looking for that.
Yep.
And if you find that, my grandma says, and I don't know if it's
Yeah.
true, but she says you can achieve the spiritual level of prophethood, like in terms of not become one, but
Right.
like you can reach that standard of piousness because
right,
you
right.
found God in your 20s when you were young,
Yep.
where you could have done anything you wanted because everybody else was doing.
You're ahead of the game if you're
Right.
able to find God when you're young. Absolutely. In
Yeah.
fact, most disciples of Jesus, Moses, and even the Holy Prophet were young people.
Mm.
When they joined him, they were young. Why? Because young minds who actually understand a movement and a mission, they're able to adopt it. But old folks are the ones who are strict and stubborn, right?
Mhm.
So, for example, at the time of the Prophet Muhammad,
Peace be
you know,
on him.
on whom be peace, he basically said, we should not be burying our daughters alive. But that was unheard of. Like, why on earth would you say that? Because they were so used to this idea that if you have a daughter, she's a burden. So the best thing is just once she's born, just bury her. And they would do this. It was a cultural norm.
Yeah.
And the Prophet said, "Are you guys crazy? Like, why would you do that? What you should be doing is you should be raising them. They are your paradise. In fact, through them you'll get success in life." So young people were like, "That makes sense. This idea of burying them makes no sense." And so they started embracing his message and started following that way. So it is young minds who have that open-mindedness toward faith and towards that pursuit of God. They can get ahead of the game, but they can also be distracted.
So that's a good point. So thinking about that right now, I think there's a perception out there that it's very like career heavy. People are very career heavy right now. But I'm just speaking of my experience, right? I don't have any polls or anything.
Sure.
But the more I talk about like religion, people are not that they're not inclined to it. They're confused right now.
Yeah.
They're confused, and there's just so many ideas out there, right?
Correct.
And although like a religion is a set belief, there's other types of religions out there, right?
Sure.
And these belief systems that they're following.
Sure.
But they're conflicted. Like today they might be something, tomorrow they might be something else.
Right.
Not even maybe they're a Muslim, right? Maybe they're Muslim, but even in their like path of being a person, it changes. And so I feel like that's where the disconnect is. It's not necessarily that they're not trying to be religious. It's just that right now in our day and age, there's just so much information out there, right?
Sure. So I got two takes on that. One thing I feel like, especially in America, is that you'll notice those who were born Christian, for example, and they're the majority, when they get disgruntled from organized religion, they leave it altogether, and they either become spiritual or they become agnostic or atheist, right? But very rarely does somebody who leaves Christianity try another faith. And I think the reason for that, there's a hidden prejudice there. They feel like if our forefathers embraced a faith and this faith failed us, there can't be anything else that's better. But I invite them, give Islam a try, because it'll give you that structure, it'll give you that spirituality, it'll give you that gap or the emptiness in your heart that you're actually looking for. I'm not trying to preach or anything, but I genuinely feel that one of the biggest challenges with our youth is that they don't actually try another organized religion. They immediately sign off like, nope, or all organized religion is corrupt and messed up. But the reason that's messed up or that's wrong is because Islam has very little in its organized sense. Meaning you don't have to go to a pastor or a priest to ask him to talk to God. You talk to God directly. You don't have to go to a mosque to pray. You can pray at home. You can pray on the sidewalk. You don't need an imam to lead you in prayer. You can lead yourself. Your parents could lead prayer at your home, but you could do whatever you want to in that sense. There's so much that gives you that individualism of your spiritual journey, but then also gives you that communal connection, that social connection. Meaning, if you work out at home, very few people can work out at home consistently, right? But and they can do it rigorously.
He's the only one that can do that. He does that
rigorously, right?
Yeah.
Most people cannot do that.
Right.
But those folks who maybe want to, but they need that support. What do? They get a gym membership. They'll see other people working out, and then they'll be like, I can do 2 more reps or 3 more reps. They need that social element. So I feel like the journey of spirituality that most people pursue, like you're mentioning, it's an individual journey, and they're kind of alone. And very few people like yourself can consistently work out, rigorously. Whereas in Islam says you can do the individual prayer. There are a whole host of prayers you do on your own. You wake up in the middle of the night, do your prayer. But at the same time, let's have this communal backing as well. Give us this energy. Make us feel that energy to like move forward in our prayer collectively. So to that point, I feel like a lot of people are like, we don't know the paradox of choice, and I get that. But there aren't that many organized religions, right?
There's not that many.
There's only 4 or 5.
Right.
But people will immediately opt out of any organized religion because of one example or an experience that they had, and they won't even try looking at Hinduism, Islam, especially not Islam. Again, I think media has a lot to do with that. But generally, I think I've seen that growing, unfortunately.
Do you feel that's lacking in Christianity?
Feel like what's lacking in Christianity?
The idea of like an organized backing, or like, I do have a question. This is like a straightforward question.
Yeah.
Is there any? I just don't. I'm a Catholic myself, and I don't know anywhere that says that like you shouldn't pray at home or like on your own being an individual. Is there something about that?
Okay, good point. So Catholicism, for example, for the longest time, and it was only recently, where even reading the Bible was only permitted at church.
Interesting, really.
Yeah, they didn't even allow you to take Bibles home. Again, this is more recently. That's not applying anymore. So if anybody's like, hey, that's wrong, I agree it's wrong now. But for the longest time in the history of Catholicism, if you wanted to read the Bible, you had to go to the church to read it, and you had to have a priest help you read it. And so that has unfortunately had a lot of Catholics kind of distance themselves or not be aware of what the Bible even says, generally. Whereas in Protestants, you'll notice they can start spitting out biblical verses because they're so accustomed to not only having it at home, reading it at home. And that's one thing. Second thing is prayer service, Sunday service. In Christianity, Sunday service has to be at church. Can't be. You don't do a prayer service at home, right? Or church
actually now there is.
I'm saying people are doing it, but generally in the organized religion aspect of it,
I see what you're saying.
It doesn't exist, right? There's an expectation you have to go to the altar, or you have to go to the church to do it. Same with Hinduism, for example, you have to go to the synagogue. Same with temple, and same with Judaism, you have to go to the synagogue. So there's a whole host. Every single faith actually expects you to go to their temple of sorts. It's only Islam. In fact, the Holy Prophet declared this. He said, I'm the first prophet that has ever been given permission by God that the entire world, he says, Joilat li ardu masjidan. Basically, like the entire world has been made a mosque for me. You can pray anywhere, and you have no reason not to. And so that is unique in that sense.
But that wasn't necessarily like in the Bible, right? That's just like Roman Catholics. They've like put this upon people.
Understood. I think the other part of it is that clergy, for example, play a vital role in your prayer service.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereas in Islam, doesn't require any clergy at all.
Right.
It doesn't even exist. Because it gives that individual that freedom to not only lead prayer on his own. Like, for example, many times I'll tell people I'm an imam. And the first thing they're like, oh, don't you have to go to the mosque to lead the prayer? I'm like, actually, I don't. Like no prayer do I have to lead. Every prayer can be led by anybody. Even a child could lead it. Whereas in Catholicism or any Christianity in general, even Hinduism, even Judaism, you need a clergy member of a sort to lead the Sunday service or Friday service or whatever it may be, Saturday service. So I think that part is unique in Islam.
I see.
A critique that a lot of people have against religion these days, and I hear this a lot, is, first of all, my criticism of people who are so critical of religion is they're always looking for wrongs.
Sure.
And they often point to specific people doing things. Correct. And again, that goes against the teachings of religion, because it's not supposed to be about the actions of a handful of people. Sure. It's about the broader teachings. And so I would encourage people to look at the positives of religion as well, because a lot of times we're nitpicking. But the major critique of people who leave organized religion or who don't believe in God at all is, and I'm sure you've heard this, why is there so much misery in this world? Why is there so much atrocities? Why are there genocides happening in virtually all corners of the world? Why does evil exist to such a degree if there is a just God? Okay. And what do you say to that?
Good. So, again, there's a whole host of answers that I can give. I think one of the basic ones is many times when somebody frames a question, they'll have a false assumption kind of sewn into it, right? So in this case, for example, if God is a God of love, why is there suffering? That's really what the question is. But the false assumption is that all suffering is bad. It's not. For example, I'll give you an example of a caterpillar, okay? If you take a caterpillar out of its cocoon early, it will never be able to fly because it'll be too swollen, and it actually needs the struggle of getting out of the cocoon on its own for it to be able to be skinny enough so it can fly. So not all struggle. Just like, for example, a woman who is pregnant and gives birth, there's a struggle there, 9 month struggle, but there's a blessing in that struggle, right? So not all suffering is bad. That's the first element of the question, or the answer to the question. The second part is, if, and I've seen a meme of this, somebody's standing there and there's another person, he shoots him. And then after he's dead, he turns around and he's like, God, why did you kill him? Right? You shot him. You did it. So in Islam, there's an element here there that God has created a system, like fire burns. He created the system, but he has taught us the correct way of using that system. Now, if we were to manipulate the system and use it against people, that's on us, not on him. And this is where most people who become atheists miss this part. They believe that God should intervene in every single scenario in order to save life. And we explain, no, God has created a system. He's given us knowledge, given us the intellect to know how to use that system. And if people manipulate that system, it's our job to stop those people using the system we have now. Otherwise, what will happen? I would literally be like, I would say something negative about God, and I would be shot by lightning, and I wouldn't have a chance to redeem myself or fix myself or have free will, for that matter. So the idea of free will is kind of allows us to have a system where we can make choices, we can make bad choices, we can have corruption, we can have hatred, we can have a host of things. That doesn't mean that God has allowed us to do it. If there's a fire, for example, and you stuck your hand in it, your hand's gonna burn. Nobody you can blame except yourself. I could say he's too dumb to know that the fire will burn, then that's his fault.
Right.
But in nowhere in that action would we be able to blame, well, God, why did you make fire burn? Why does it have this characteristic? That's ridiculous, God. You did the action of something that we know what characteristics it has. So if you were to look at the largest death toll in life, or in the world, it's always been World War I and World War II. Both of which were political wars. They had nothing to do with religion, they had nothing to do with God. These are people who wanted to usurp the rights of others, and they allowed 80, 90 million people to die. So I think if those people who claim that God is a God of love, then embrace his loving characteristics and see that change in life. Otherwise, yeah, you're going to keep seeing destruction. We're seeing World War III around the corner right now. It's because people are just trigger happy. They don't care that people are dying in Palestine. They don't care that people are dying in Ukraine. In America, if you say anything about Ukraine, they'll just be like, look at you like you're crazy. No, you have to be against Russia. But there are people dying in Ukraine. We shouldn't be okay with that just as much as we're not okay with anybody dying in Palestine. Whether they're Jew or Muslim, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Nobody should be dying anywhere. But it's not on us. It's people who are allowing these atrocities to continue.
Yeah. Because people, I get very annoyed by people who cite genocide as an example of why God doesn't exist. For example, there's this one guy I know, right? I met him at a swap meet, and we were talking about religion.
Yeah.
And for the last 8 months, this man, anytime we have a discussion on God, he sends me a graphic video out of Palestine of a child dying, or, just like violent images. And he's like, where's your God? Where's your God? Your God isn't protecting this child. Yeah. And I've explained him the concept of free will, but still, people.
But to these people, their God is the government. So where's your God? The answer to them is, where's your God? Your God is America, for example. Then have America stop the genocide.
I liked what you said about it's actually our responsibility as humans to stop those atrocities.
100%.
So the onus is on us. Yeah. I think by nature we like to shift responsibility and blame something that is beyond our control. Yeah. And so a lot of people
allow it to continue to happen.
Right. So a lot of people that don't believe in God, they blame God, which doesn't make sense. If you don't believe in God, that is it really God's fault, right? It's like an oxymoron in itself. But
it's just, for example, me and him, if we were to fight right now, and you just stood there and just saw me knock him out,
it's my job.
And then I would be like, yeah, it's God. And you'd be like, yeah, man, God knocked him out. That's excellent.
Right.
But that's not the case.
Takes away all free will.
Exactly.
There is no free will in that scenario.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So, okay, this is a question. I 100% agree that it's our responsibility over God's responsibility. Just a question. So, if God is all-knowing, he's omniscient.
Yep.
And he knows how things are going to play out, right? There has to be a different, in my opinion, I don't know how true it is or whatever, but in my opinion, how I see it is, there's good and bad in life. People make bad decisions, but they're kind of martyrs for the majority of people that are good, right? And without the bad, we can't see the good.
Sure.
And so that's like the contradiction itself, because God is all-knowing. He knows what's going to happen. He knows who's going to do bad and when. And he also knows who's going to do good and when.
Sure.
And so in my opinion, it's like they're like martyrs. Would you agree with that, or how would you see it?
So the way I see it, two things. One is that, for example, look at Noah's example, right? We know that he knew of the flood. He reminded his people, hey, the flood's coming. And they said, we don't believe you. You're out of your mind, so on and so forth, right? And the reason why that's important is because he warned them of an impending destruction. They ignored him. They were destroyed. Now we can blame God. But you can't, because God was there to tell them not to go in that direction, right? So in the same way, whenever we look at, for example, like you were saying, the destruction around the world or whatever's happening in this world, we have to look at the idea that each one of us plays a role to help stop the idea of destruction. And the number one way that we believe as Ahmadi Muslims is that God does intervene, but not directly, not as in the sense of like, he doesn't send down a bolt of lightning. He has a system. What is the system? He sends his angels and he speaks to people, good-hearted people. And those good-hearted people start to create that wave of change. And it doesn't happen immediately. Just like a baby's not born immediately. It takes 9 months for a baby to be born. You can have, you can consummate tonight, but you will not have a baby until 9 months. In the same way, God, if he sees that we're headed on a dark trajectory, we believe that God speaks to his human beings today, as he did in the past, and he then guides them to stop the destruction that the world is headed on. So we believe, for example, our founder, or the Holy Prophet Muhammad, or Jesus, or Moses, or whoever they were all those people who warned the world of an impending doom.
I see.
And that's the only way God consistently reminds us. It's for us, it's wild that people believe God spoke to Jesus, but he doesn't speak to anybody anymore. Like, if you truly believe that God spoke to Jesus and spoke to Moses, there's no reason why he can't speak to me and you. Right. And once we acknowledge that aspect, then it changes a lot, because now you and I can have a certainty of belief in God. Until he doesn't talk to us, it's only theory, right? That there should be a God. But when he talks to us, I know there's a God. And that's the difference.
So God can speak to anyone.
Absolutely.
Regardless of what denomination you are, what ethnicity, doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
Regardless of your spiritual status.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And many, like I said, there are many people who are prostitutes, for example, and they'll wake up with a true dream. Many of us have had true dreams.
Right.
And we're not spiritual people per se, But why is that? Because God wants to remind you, hey, I do exist. Here's what's going to happen. Here's a little intuition. And we call it all kinds of things, karma, and a whole host of other things. But really, that's just God intervening.
That to me makes the most sense, because everybody has equal opportunity to access God.
Has to be.
It has to be.
Without it, then God is, God forbid, corrupt.
Or unjust, which he's not.
Exactly.
Which is perfect, right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have 3 set questions. Just I know I'm gonna forget.
Lightning round?
No.
Lightning round. Question number 1.
Go ahead.
Genuine. So you did say right there, which I just maybe out of ignorance, you said that God sends down angels. Are angels the same as spirits?
Are angels the same as spirits? We believe angels are not in a physical sense.
Right.
Each one of us has our own set of angels and our own set of Satan. That's one element.
Okay.
The other part of it that we believe is that angels are just the first cause of anything God declares or decrees, I should say. So, for example, any natural law that exists, behind it are angels.
So,
in addition to communication. Communication is another one, where God then communicates to his people. Behind that is also an angel.
I understand.
So that's how we see it. So if you can call it a spirit or whatever, maybe whatever form they need to do their job, it is that.
So this sounds a lot to me like the Holy Trinity.
Okay.
So we've talked about the Holy Trinity a lot. We had 2 Christians on, and it was a big thing. So it's God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, right? The Spirit seems like the driving force, like you're saying.
Okay.
God, like Jesus Christ, seems like the one that's verbally speaking, right? And God is the one that's making the decisions.
The difference is that they believe it's God, the Son, and then Holy Spirit. They go from top to bottom. We believe that their side. Oh, sorry, they believe they're sideways. We believe it's top to bottom.
Okay.
They believe they're equal as 3 gods.
Equal, yeah.
We don't. We believe God speaks to the angels. Angels speak to the prophet, and vice versa. So in that way, the system of God gets created. So we believe in angels, we believe in prophets, we believe in books of God, meaning the words that the prophet has given us, and we believe in God himself. Then we believe in the day of judgment, and we believe in the natural law, which is the decree of God.
Okay.
These are our 6 articles of faith in any Muslim that believes all 6 of these things. But if you look at them, in essence, they include, like you said, they include God the Father, they include the prophets, and they include the angels. And the other reason why it's important is, God the Son, for example, it's mentioned in the Bible. Adam, for example, Luke 3:38, Adam is called the Son of God. Moses in Exodus 7:1, God says, you are a prophet and Aaron you are a God and Aaron is your prophet. If you look at David, for example, there's a prophet, or there's a words in the Bible where he's called the Son of God. In other places, he's called the begotten Son of God. If you look at all the prophets in the Bible, I would say majority of them have been called either Son of God or begotten Son of God. So that's exactly why when I read the Bible, I see Jesus as a Son of God in the spiritual sense. He's an ambassador of God, just like Moses was, just like Adam was, just like everybody else was. He was a prophet. And that's why when we look at the Trinity, for us, the Trinity is not equal in its rank or power, but they're just explaining the system of God. We got God, and then you have a prophet, and then you have an angel.
So essentially, they're separate entities to you guys, but they are still driving forces.
It's part of the system of God.
It's part of the system.
Yeah, absolutely.
But God is God. He has no partner.
Correct. He doesn't need any of them.
No daughter.
He just chooses to use the system.
Yeah.
Correct.
All the angels are vehicles to
Correct.
reach God. Prophets.
Sure.
God is, there's no equivalent to God, essentially.
And you pray directly to God. You don't need to go through anybody either.
Right. That's the major difference.
But those angels or spirits, right? They don't have to only speak to the prophets, right? They could speak to the masses.
So in the Holy Quran, for example, it says that angels also speak to the honeybee. They reveal to him, to the honeybee as well. So yes, the idea is that the natural law is also governed by angels. That's the idea.
I see. And so Jesus Christ, Ibrahim says, I know there's 2 separate beliefs between Amethyst and normal.
Other Muslims.
Can you explain those?
Sure. I'll try to be brief.
Yeah.
No, I know it's very complicated,
but basically,
Jesus Christ's death.
Yeah. Basically, so Jesus Christ's death. Here's the basic breakdown. Every Muslim in the world, every Christian in the world believes Jesus will return. Okay, the Prophet Muhammad said it. Jesus himself said it, on whom be peace. And so the idea is that Jesus will return. The only difference, or here's a challenge, is that according to Ahmadi Muslims, we believe that Jesus has died a natural death, both by the Holy Quran and the Bible. I can prove it in both. And as a result, when he said, I will return, he implied somebody will return that will do the same work I did. He'll return in the same way I did. Just like, for example, in the Holy Quran, Moses' second coming is likened to the Holy Prophet Muhammad.
Peace.
Okay? Meaning, Moses came with a new law. Muhammad came with a new law. Moses came with a book. He came with a book. Moses was a governor of his land. Holy Prophet would be a governor of his land. So there would be a similarity there.
Okay.
In the same way, Jesus in the Holy Quran says, I will also return, which means that somebody will come in his name. And in the Holy Quran, even the word Ahmad is used. Jesus says, his name will be Ahmad, the one who comes after me. And so obviously we believe it to be the Holy Prophet Muhammad, but we also believe that name will also apply to the second coming of Jesus. Now here's in a nutshell, what we believe is that when he comes, and we believe it to be the founder of our community, his name is Ghulam Ahmad, which means servant of Ahmad. When he came, he made it very clear that my objective is to do everything in my power to bring everybody back to the religion of the Holy Prophet Muhammad.
Peace be upon him.
I have not come with a new book. I have not come with a new law. I have not come with anything new. In fact, I'm a subordinate servant of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. That's the difference. That Muslims, other Muslims, I should say, Sunni and Shia Muslims, believe the same Jesus will come back as a prophet. We believe the same Jesus will not come back, but another prophet will be born in Islam. Now, why that's important? Because there's a verse in the Holy Quran that says Khatamun Nabiyyin. Very famous verse. Every Muslim will quote it. Ahmadis quote it as well. It implies the seal of the prophets. Some people translate it as the last of the prophets.
Okay.
Now, what they insinuate from this verse is that since it says he's last, therefore no prophet can come after the Holy Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace.
Peace be on him.
Which we say we agree with you. But what do you do about Jesus? Because they believe Jesus will come afterwards. So I said, no matter what you do, a prophet will come after the Holy Prophet Muhammad.
Peace be on him.
Whether he's an old prophet or a new one. The difference is that.
Okay.
So the difference between all other Muslims and Ahmadi Muslims is they believe an old prophet will come, we believe a new one. That's the only difference.
Yeah.
And when we explain it, we say, look, if you fixate on this idea that the Holy Prophet has to be, on whom be peace, has to be the last prophet, what are you going to do when Jesus comes? He does his work and then he passes away. Let's say my granddaughter walks up to me one day and after Jesus is dead, has come and done his work and he's passed away now. Now my granddaughter comes to me and says, you know, who's the last prophet? I got to do this quiz in class, for example. What would I say to her? The Holy Prophet Muhammad?
Peace be on him. Right.
I couldn't because Jesus just came.
Right.
So I would have to say Jesus. So that's the same thing we explain to them, that no matter what you do, the prophet will come afterwards. The only difference is it a new one or an old one? Now, if you don't like, you know, the founder of the Ahmadiyya community, you don't like him to be a prophet, that's fine. You don't have to like him. That's your choice. But at least acknowledge the fact that a prophet will come after the Holy Prophet Muhammad. The Holy Quran says it. All the books of Hadith say it. Right? Everything says it. Now, reason why that's important is because as a result of us embracing the Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, countries have gone after us. We are not allowed to do the Hajj, the pilgrimage. In certain countries like Pakistan, we cannot even call ourselves Muslim. We've been declared non-Muslim. We cannot vote. Right. We cannot hold conventions. We can't do anything. We're targeted. We're killed. We're looted. You name it. Same thing happens in Bangladesh. So it's a whole host of Muslim countries. Algeria, Indonesia. The list goes on. And so what we tell them there again is, we have a difference in belief. Don't stop us from sharing our belief. Why are you scared? Right? It seems like but anyway, yeah.
And it doesn't make any sense, right? Because technically, they are making a violation of what they're accusing us, even greater than what they're accusing us of doing. Because what we're saying is, Muhammad, on whom be peace, was the last law-bearing prophet.
Correct.
And they actually believe Jesus was a law-bearing prophet. Right. So technically, they are
allowing him to come back.
They're saying that Muhammad, peace be on him, was not the last law-bearing prophet because Jesus is going to come. Yeah. But we're saying Muhammad, on whom be peace, was the last law-bearing prophet, meaning that you bring in a book like the Quran or the Bible, which
and it stays till the end.
And it stays to the end.
It's the last law.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes the contradictory to me is with Sunnis or Shia, whatever it is, they don't believe Jesus Christ died, right?
Correct. They believe he's in heaven.
Correct.
Physically with his body. And that's something we can never accept. One, the Holy Quran says no human being can ever live forever. No human being should be sitting in heaven. And as I said, if you were to now for a moment just look at the Bible, even Christians, for example, struggle with this because they believe Jesus is also sitting in heaven. So what I tell my Muslim brothers is that the moment you ascribe to this belief that Jesus is sitting in heaven, the number one thing a pastor will tell you, and this happens very often, is a pastor will say, "Where is Muhammad?" And you will say,
"Peace be on him.
Where is
He's
Muhammad?
dead.
He's dead. Where is he? Buried.
He's buried
in the ground
in Saudi Arabia.
Where is Jesus, according to non-Ahmadi Muslims?
Up in the skies, right?
So they'll say, okay, in that case, our God is in heaven, and your prophet is in hell, or and buried in the earth, I should say. So this immediately, basically, puts any Muslim in an existential crisis because now they have to accept the fact that their lesser prophet is actually sitting in heaven, which means he may even be God. Right. Because who else could go to heaven? Yeah. Whereas in my prophet Muhammad is actually buried on the earth. Right. And that's the difference with us. When a Christian comes to me and he tells me, "Where is Muhammad?" I say, "He's buried in the ground." They say, "Well, where is Jesus?" I say, "He's buried in the ground too." And they're like, "How is that possible?" And I give them a very basic example. Look at the Bible. There's a story of Jesus. And a brief version of it is that Jesus was, declared by the Jews, to be put on the cross. And the governor Pontius Pilate, had realized that Jesus is an innocent man because his wife saw a dream the night before. I'm quoting this directly from the Bible. This is a version of it.
Yeah, we talk about in church.
Right, so wife, exactly. So wife saw a dream that Jesus is an innocent man, don't harm him. So Pontius Pilate delayed his crucifixion until Friday. Why? Because Friday night is the Sabbath. And the Sabbath, two things happen. Either somebody who is on the cross is already dead, so they take him off because they can't keep anybody on the cross, or they break their legs. Why do they do that? Because they will then, the body will suffocate and they'll die immediately. Because crucifixion's punishment is death. Right. It's just a cruel way of doing it.
Right.
where you would die not instantly, but over 3 days of hunger and starvation. That's how you die. Where you're not getting any water, not getting anything. So he puts Jesus on the cross around 1 or 3 p.m. And his idea was that at least his suffering should be less. He's going to have to die, but at least his suffering should be less.
Because Shabbat.
Because it's Sabbath, exactly, Shabbat. But what happens now? All the other disciples and everybody runs away. Why? There's an earthquake. There's an eclipse. It's just like this
Sign after sign.
Yeah, it's like,
right.
what is going on? There's a storm. But only 2 people, 2 of his disciples remain. One is Nicodemus and one is Joseph of Arimathea.
Okay.
One of them is a physician, he's a doctor, and the other is a businessman. The only 2 who left, or stayed, sorry, should remained. Everybody else ran away. What happens? After a few hours, when it's time to take him down, he seems to be, what we believe, unconscious. He seems to be dead. But the 2 others that are on the cross, they're alive and they're awake. And so immediately the guards go and they break their legs and they die. Now when it comes to Jesus, the physician says he seems to be dead. Allow us to take him down without breaking his legs. Okay. What does a guard do? So first thing happens is when they send this to the governor, it says in the Bible, he marveled. He's like, what? How is he dead? How, in 2 hours? Nobody dies in 2 hours. How's that possible? He says, fine, you can take him down without breaking his legs. But just to, I guess, maybe God did this intentionally, a soldier comes with a spear and pierces him. He stabs him. And the Bible says immediately blood gushed out. In other places, blood and water gushed out. Now, if you've ever seen a dead body, and I can put one here for you, and you poke at it.
Can you?
Blood, yeah, I know, right? Blood will never gush out. What will happen? It'll seep out, right? If it's gushing out, that means something is pumping.
Or an artery, right?
The heart is pumping, right? How else could it gush out? There's no way. If it's dead, he's dead. You poke at it, the blood will just seep out and he's dead. But for it to mention that his, obviously his heart is still pumping, he's still alive. Then what do? They don't break his legs, they take him down. Then what do? Whenever a Christian dies, you know this better than I do, is they bury them. A Christian is never put into a cave. They bury them. But they took Jesus into a cave, a sepulcher it's called. And when they took him in there, the Bible states that Mary and a few others took 100 pounds of aloe and myrrh into the tomb. Aloe and myrrh is like Neosporin and Tylenol. Okay? Now, if you were to take Tylenol and Neosporin to a dead body, I would be like, what's wrong with you? He's dead. But they came and they wrapped him in this 100 pounds of it for the next 2.5 days. And then what does it say? The Bible says after the 3rd day, he appeared in different places. Walking around. In fact, he came to his disciples and he had, holes in his hands. And Thomas saw him and Thomas was like a ghost. He's like, oh my God. Like, how are you alive? I thought you were dead. Right. And Jesus says, Thomas, it is I. Thrust your hands in my wounds and see that it is I. And then just to prove that he's just a human being like everybody else, this is our belief, he says, I'm hungry, bring me food. They bring him fish and honeycomb, and he eats it right in front of them. And then the last scene that we see is that he goes, to a mountain.
Okay.
And he speaks to the disciples and says, I'm going now. I'm gone. I got to leave. And he walks into the clouds.
Right.
Now, the reason why this is interesting is the one is you've seen many times in LA, when the clouds are low, you can see the top of the mountain too.
Okay.
It looks as if you're walking into the clouds, but you could technically go on the other side of the mountain and keep going, number one. The other part of it that we understood is that there are 4 gospels, right?
Okay.
There's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Out of these 4, 2 of them are not disciples. They are not eyewitness to what happened to Jesus. 2 of them are the disciples. Matthew and John are disciples. They were eyewitness to what happened to Jesus. Mark and Luke never saw Jesus ever. They came 100 years later. And what's interesting is that Jesus going to heaven and sitting on the right hand of God is only mentioned by Mark and Luke. Matthew and John do not mention anywhere that Jesus went to heaven at all. They're eyewitnesses. If they didn't mention it, for me as a believer, I'm reading it, I'm like, oh, okay, it makes sense. He must have continued his work. What was his work? I have not come but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So our belief is that he continued his work to find the lost sheep. And we actually believe that he ended up as far east as India to finish his work, where he went to Kashmir and he found the lost tribes there, settled there, and died there, and there's actually a tomb there even till this day.
In
with-
India,
in
present day
India, right.
India.
So that's our belief.
So now what I'm curious about is
Sure.
if Jesus says that he's come for the Jews in Israel, why then continue?
Oh, because he said, I'm not here for these tribes. I'm looking for the lost tribes. Remember, in Jerusalem at the time, there were only two tribes, Judah and Benjamin.
Okay. Oh,
The
right.
reason they're called Jews is because from Judah. That's where it comes,
Right.
Jews. Or Judaism, for example.
Mhm.
But the other 10 were lost. Even till this day, they're lost. Some suspect they were in India. Some suspect they went to France. Some suspect they came to America. For example, the
I see.
entire Mormon belief is that they came to America, the 10 lost tribes. And that's how they created that story of Moroni and all that stuff. That's, well, I shouldn't say they created it, but that's their
That's their
version
belief,
of it.
right?
That's their belief, correct. And so our belief is that he actually went to East India. So again, this is the difference. We believe, again, difference from Christians is that we believe Jesus survived the cross and he continued his work. And difference from Muslims is that we believe he was on the cross, survived it, and he did not go to heaven under any circumstance.
Before I forget, so you said there's 4 gospels, right?
Correct.
The 2 of them that say that
Mark
Jesus,
and Luke.
Mark and Luke are the ones that say that he went up into the heavens,
And sat on the right hand of God.
and they
Correct.
came 100 years after.
about 100 years after. Correct.
So the only 2 that were technically could have been physically present at the time
do not mention
do not mention
at all. I think it's in
Interesting.
the book of John or Matthew. I can't remember which one. At the end of it, it just says, and then there's other stories. It doesn't even. If there's other stories and something as profound as going to heaven, I would think he would mention it. He wouldn't miss it out, But he doesn't mention it.
So it was Luke and
Mark,
and then the ones that actually witnessed this were John and
Matthew.
Matthew. So there was no point in time John and Matthew ever came in contact. How did they come up with that?
Who?
Luke and
They have. So again, this is
Mark.
Christians have done their own studies and they've included it based on other versions, and they've written that Acts, for example, mentioned it, and then Luke copied it from there. There's a whole study on it.
Okay.
I don't want to dictate on why they said it, but this is from Christian, historians, not from me,
I see.
not from a Muslim perspective or anything.
Yeah.
This is a deeper dive in their own study.
Okay.
That they have actually said that some places where that segment is actually added much later, the idea of him going to heaven and sitting on the right hand of God.
So Matthew and John were there with Jesus at that.
It's suspected that Matthew and John were disciples.
Why didn't they accompany Jesus to
Good
go
question.
east?
That we don't know. We don't know why he didn't accompany. Maybe because they had to stay there, otherwise the Roman Empire would come after him. Maybe he had to go alone. Remember, death penalty was still on him. He had to get out of the Roman Empire as quick as he could.
So he went there alone. He went east alone.
We believe. Again, he could have taken some other people with him. I'll give you another example. Thomas, for example, right? Thomas is a disciple of Jesus. And if you look at the history of the Christian church, randomly, 50 years later or whatever it is, Thomas traveled to India. And he established a church there, right? Now you wonder, why on earth would Thomas decide to leave Jerusalem and go all the way to India? We suspect that Thomas may have known that Jesus went as far as India. And so he went looking for his master. It's possible. There's just different versions. Again, we'll never really know. But
Yeah.
different belief systems there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not to go very existential into the
Yeah, sure.
conversation, but something that, and I think about this, and my mind just goes into a very dark space, because I'm a very firm Ahmadi Muslim. I believe in all of our teachings and beliefs, but something I've been thinking about is obviously the object of humans' creation is to worship God and recognize His Creator, and like I've told you, like do good by
acts,
humanity, do good acts, rights of man and rights of God.
Yeah.
But why did God create all of this? Right? Like, like I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, I'm driving. I drive a lot to LA to do stand up, and on my drives, I go to like these dark spaces, and I was thinking, like, if everything is operating in a way where at the end of the day, God will be proven right? Like, why did God create all of this? Like, what is the object of creation in itself? I understand the purpose, but existentially, why create the earth?
Why create it if it's going to be destroyed anyways?
No. Why create it if God will be vindicated at the end of the day?
It's
I don't know if
I
that's
don't
the
think
right
that's the purpose. I see what you mean, though.
Yeah.
So one is God. So the beautiful thing about the Holy Quran is that it identifies or it creates an image of God through His characteristics, through His attributes. One of His attributes is to create, for example, right? And so our belief again is that he has certain attributes and he'll exercise them. And one of them is to create, one of them is to formulate, one of them is to, so different ways of creation. There's some that you create that something already exists, you mold it into something new, or you create out of nothingness. So there's different characteristics of God.
Mm-hmm.
So to your point, I don't know. I can never really pinpoint as to why, but I can only suspect that if God wanted this to exist, he wanted to create, this was one thing that he created. But other than that, beyond me, it's something that I ponder over as well, and that's a good thing to think about.
Right.
It gives you a chance to kind of get deeper into the greater purpose of life.
It gives me like a weird feeling though when I think about it. Like when I think about when I was a child and I used to think about, not that I was pondering over life and death, but I used to think like about the concept of death and like, whoa, all of this is gone. Like I got like a weird feeling in my stomach.
Yeah.
And to your point about God having multiple creations, what is Islam's stance on aliens? Because in the Quran, God says that humans are ashraful makhluqat, which translates to the best of creation, right? So by that theological standard, I think there are other creations, not equivalent to humans, but in their own way, we can't even understand them, that are out there, civilizations that we can't even think of or comprehend. So technically,
it's a Pandora's box.
Right.
I know the moment I open this,
it's gonna
deep conversation.
Right.
And more questions will come than answers. But to your point, the Holy Quran, I should say, is a book that can easily embrace the idea of the existence of aliens. It wouldn't be a foreign book. It wouldn't be obsolete if an alien showed up. Let's put it that way. Because immediately it says God is the Lord of all the worlds. Literally, it consistently says this in our prayer in the very first chapter of the Holy Quran.
And the first chapter we recite dozens of times a day.
Rabbul Alameen. He's literally the Lord of all the worlds. So, tomorrow, if we have
an alien come down.
We're like, oh, he's your Lord as well, just for the record.
What he's like reciting the first chapter, and he's I'm like, what? No way.
Exactly.
That's the only mode of communication. Imagine.
Yeah.
The Arabic verses. Have you seen the movie Arrival?
No, I have not.
You should see it. You've seen it, right?
Yeah, Arrival's great.
It talks about aliens in a way where I think it's the most realistic version. They're not like these creatures like Star Wars. They are like it makes me think that there is intellect out there, and it's not in human form. In Arrival, it's like these giant things that communicate with like circles, and it's a very different vernacular. But the point is, they're wise as well, and they have dreams, and they have intellect, and they have choice and decision making. And I think, again, I don't know anything, but if I would have to make a conjecture, I think there's civilizations out there with intellect and the same level of problems, just in different physical forms.
You don't think it'd be like Men in Black, huh?
Nah, I don't know.
More entertaining, no?
I've only seen clips of Men in Black. I haven't seen it. I need to see it. Yeah, I need to see. I need to see Men in Black.
It's silly, but it's silly.
Yeah.
One of my friends right now is he's about to go to school to become a pastor. So he's going to
seminary school.
Seminary school, exactly. At what college? Doesn't matter what college.
Biola?
Yeah, Biola.
Right.
Okay.
And so we watched this movie, an alien movie, right? And then it dove into that question.
Sure.
And he told me that he does believe in aliens, or like as a Christian, or as he believes in aliens, but he believes that they are actually demons.
Interesting.
And that in the Bible, he drew, I don't know word for word, but he drew some connection that in the Bible it says that there are other beings out there, but those beings come from. He said it came from. Not space, but like from the heavens, or some, not heavens, but like this, whatever. Yeah. And he says that they came down as a false god, basically. They're false gods.
Okay.
Because we're looking up, and that was his conclusion, that since we're looking up and they're coming from there, that they're false gods and hence demons.
It's easy to fear something you don't know and to label it as a demon, just for the record.
Yeah.
But Islam doesn't do that. The Holy Quran doesn't do that. It doesn't say. In fact, it shuns the idea of like a black magic and just having these, these fears of whatever they are. Instead, that's what I said, Rabbul Alameen. The reason why that verse is very powerful,
Lord of all the worlds.
Discussions, exactly, right. Lord of all the worlds, is because, to your point, we don't know. We have no idea that can we even communicate with them? Maybe if they're so far away,
Mm.
there's no way for us to actually communicate. When we pass away, then God tells us, hey, by the way, there were these other planets
Right.
so far away, and they existed too, and they had their version of faith or whatever that is. So, but yeah, I don't know, maybe that's their version and that makes sense to them, I guess. But I just feel like it's easy for us. We've had this in time immemorial, that whenever you don't know the black man, let's be afraid of him. You don't know the Indian guy.
Xenophobia.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So all this adds up. So, but I think in the Holy Quran, or basically in Islam, I don't think there's a fear element there. I think there's an unknown. But yeah, beyond that, I don't know. I've never heard that version, by the way.
Interesting.
It's an interesting thing.
Maybe
Yeah.
that was his conclusion.
Yeah.
The demons.
Yeah.
What do you think? Like, do you think they would be demons or?
We don't even believe there's demons in this world, by the way. In Islam, we don't accept any idea of demons.
Well, we believe in Satan. So is Satan the same thing as demon?
No, because demon would be like a personification of, right?
Interesting.
I would say the other way around. Basically, demon would be a personification of Satan. Correct?
Hmm.
We don't believe any such thing exists. As I said, when it comes to interjection, God does not interject with these kinds of creatures at all in any way or form. You and I have our belief, and we have our ability to pursue God, and nobody can interrupt that pursuit.
Mm.
Like they have exorcisms. That doesn't exist in Islam at all. None of it. We believe there's no black magic. In fact, when I was serving in the Pacific Islands, black magic is a big thing, especially in developing nations, I should say.
Africa too, right?
Right, Africa as well. And many a times they would be like, I just became a Muslim, but the entire village or the village lady just did black magic on me. Imam, what should I do, right? And I had nothing else to tell him, otherwise I don't believe it. So I would tell him, you know what? Go back to the village lady. Tell her to put it on me. Tell her to put whatever she can put on me, all she wants to.
Test her,
Nothing
right.
will happen. Yeah. And then they would do that, and what could they do? I'm walking around like nothing's happening,
Yeah.
So in that way, there's
Right.
nothing like that exists in Islam. I know there are some versions of Muslims who believe in jinn and these hidden creatures and stuff.
Jinn meaning ghosts, right?
Ghosts or whatever it is, jinn
Right.
or just demons. For example.
That was
This
my next
guy is
question.
scared of ghosts. He
That is the
actually, he's told me
It
stories.
doesn't exist.
He's told me stories though, where I'm like, I mean, I don't know, like you
Sure.
heard something and right, like
That is the
explain.
only thing
No,
in
but
this.
hearing something can be from God too, though. That can be an angel too.
So this is the only thing in this life there's nothing else. I'm not afraid
Scared.
of a gun. I'm not afraid of any human.
Okay.
Because in just my perspective, maybe I'm not going to survive the situation or the outcome,
Sure.
but there's something I can do about it, right?
Sure,
but a
sure.
ghost, I can't comprehend it.
Sure.
I can't see it.
Is there a movie you watched when you were young? Or something?
No. So
Maybe there is. I don't know.
yeah, I mean, so
Ghostbusters, Freak Show or something.
Insidious too.
no, I'll tell you. So there's been two points. I just one of them it's skeptical, but this last one, this was actually about 2 months ago.
Okay.
Okay, me, my dad, and my dad's girlfriend.
It's very recent.
Very
I'm
recent,
interested,
about 2
actually.
months ago.
Okay.
We're in my house, and my dad, we were actually expanding the house out, right?
Okay.
So we unplugged a bunch of stuff, and then my dad, he has 2 newborns actually. One's 2 and one is 6 months.
Oh, okay.
And so the 2-year-old, she can talk and everything, and her nickname for me is Guy. She calls me
Okay.
Guy. Okay. So we're there in like where the expansion's at, and we're talking, and we hear from her name's Mia. We hear from Mia's room, Guy, and so we're talking, whatever, and then she says, Guy, and calls me again, and she same baby gibberish, but with Guy. And I turn, and I'm going to walk to her, and then my dad's girlfriend Jessica, she's like, Matt, where are you going? And I'm like, Mia's calling me, and she's like, Mia's right here, and she points at the couch right next to me.
Okay.
And the baby is in their room, just I don't know if she was asleep, what she was doing, but she was in their room. But we all heard it. And Jessica was like, who was it? Her thing was, who was it? And I was like, it was Mia. And I look at my dad is anti everything too, right? And he's like, I heard it too. And he was like, I don't know what it was. He starts coming out with other conclusions, right?
Yeah, sure.
But to me, I'm like, this is weird. Mia's sleeping, and I'm hearing it from her room. What else can it be?
It was your Google Home.
It was yeah, right? I mean,
Alexa.
Alexa
Yeah.
was talking to you. He was playing some old video. I get your point. And like I said, there are people who hear things. Hopefully you're not those kind of people, but, but there are other
Schizo.
people.
It's a
Who
disease.
hear things. But they're spiritual things, right?
Yeah.
Like we have people who've converted and just embraced God, and they heard God speak to them. Right? So those things do happen, and But anyway, to your point, we don't believe in them. There's one thing I guess I could add is that we believe that when somebody passes away, when they're in their grave, you should visit them up to 40 days at least.
up to 40 days.
And the reason for that is that if the person is very much attached to the world, then their soul is struggling to part from the body. He's like, I didn't even know
Whoa.
that.
It's a sense of purgatory.
Well, not sort of. It's basically he's just trying to hesitate.
It's uneasiness. It's like anxiety.
Exactly. So we believe in that. So that's why we actually go to the grave and we'll pray for them, because obviously nobody should be stuck here. They want to be able to go to the next life and embrace the spirituality, but their soul is struggling to separate from the body, and that's
Right.
only up to 40 days. But again, that's not the same as a ghost.
But that's a common belief for a ghost, right?
I get it, but that's what I said. But that it can't communicate with you.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So another example I'll give you is the Holy Prophet Muhammad, on
Peace
whom
be
be
on
peace. When the Battle of Badr, which is a very famous battle, 313 versus 1,000, where the Muslims were outnumbered and so on and so forth, out equipment and all that stuff. But they ended up winning the battle, and many of the chiefs who were against Muslims ended up dying in this battle, and so they had to be buried. And so as they're burying them in this mass grave, the Prophet starts talking to them. Okay, and he starts saying that I don't remember the exact words, but he begins speaking to them. And so Hazrat Umar, who's the very close disciple to the Prophet, he comes to him and says, again, because it's our core belief, he says, Prophet, they can't hear you. They're dead. They're passed away. There's no way you can communicate with them. So why are you talking to them? And there the Prophet says that you don't know, Umar. They can hear me clearer right now than you can even hear me. And he began saying something. Now, there are different interpretations, right? Was he talking to the dead? Was he talking to the ghost? But what one interpretation we have is that his words were prophetic, which means that when they are standing on the Day of Judgment, they'll be reiterated that experience. They'll be able to hear it clearer and louder than anything else, right? And they're supposed to hear these words. So there's the only two examples that I can think of where there's some interaction with the deceased.
Yeah.
Beyond that, we believe that once they're in the next dimension, they're in the next dimension. There is no way for them to come back.
Right.
If that makes any sense.
So, like you said, I don't know what it is.
I don't either.
Right? But it was something, I definitely heard something.
Sure.
I don't know what it was, ghost or God or angel.
Could be anything.
Hopefully it was
Think
somebody who
positive.
lived there.
He's
Or
your
someone
boy-
who used to live
You
there
probably
and
want to get him
died.
checked.
Yeah. There's a facility here.
Yeah.
4 miles away.
Yeah.
Actually, there is one in Downey.
I did not know that you pray to somebody's grave for 40 days.
You should. You can up to 40 days.
Up to 40
Just knowing
days.
that they may or may not be struggling with,
So what happens at day 41?
No, nothing. You don't have to go. It's just an
Right.
idea
Okay.
that, there could be somebody who's very worldly and his body is struggling. So just go and pray for them.
So like the idea is to pray for their peace of mind.
Correct. And they're being able to accept fate, I guess, or whatever.
What are they resisting? Because at that
They're
point you've
so
lost
worldly.
consciousness, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So
So that's beyond consciousness. Then.
Correct. Well, their souls are still there, right? And their souls don't want to part with this world. It's a deeper conversation, but yeah, basically.
So then there's different layers of consciousness, though, right? Because technically they're dead, but they're still
Their soul is not dead. Yeah,
their soul is not dead.
that's right.
So, is a person's soul ever really dead after they pass away? Because if they're going to, right, heaven or hell or that status of purgatory, what is that status? Is that status?
Let me explain it in a different way. So Islam, for example, embraces the idea that your soul and your body are very much linked. Meaning, for example, the reason why when we pray, for example, we prostrate. We actually physically put our forehead on the floor. And Jesus prayed the same way. Abraham prayed the same way, and so on and so forth. And the reason for that is because if you do not put your soul in a physical state of prostration, it will never feel the same humbleness as you would
Right.
by just sitting on a chair, for example, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why we believe it's so connected that if you consistently do bad things, worldly things, your soul gets so connected to that act that's why when you die, it's hesitant or it doesn't know how to part, or you know what I mean? Whereas if you were spiritual and you're bowing down and your soul is humbled and it knows exactly how to be able to mold into the next life, if that makes any sense.
So it's a process of kind of letting go.
Letting go, correct.
Interesting. So death, you have to come to terms with it.
I guess so.
Even after you pass away. Like your soul, even though your physical body
Depending on
is
how
dead,
corrupt it is, correct.
it's not operating, and that process can be long.
Yeah.
If
As
you're
up to 40 days. Yeah.
up to 40 days.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
That is, that makes sense to me. But so with that is so the person visiting the grave, they're not praying for them to go to heaven. They're just praying for their soul to be at ease.
Yeah,
or it can
exactly.
be
They're
both.
praying for their work that they did in this world that it should continue. Praying for their legacy. Praying for, praying that whatever prayers they made, make those prayers be true. Various things in which you're connected. Obviously, their fate is now in God's hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't control that. Once they've passed away, they're passed away.
The last question I have, unless it's on this topic, because I'm gonna go off topic.
Well, I was gonna say I appreciate how Muslims pray, and a lot of Christians pray this as well. I was watching a video on my Instagram feed, and it was a lot of Orthodox Christians in a church, and they were actually praying in an Islamic way.
Correct.
You sent me that.
Yeah,
and I saw that, and I was like, "What the heck?"
Right.
Yeah.
And Russ, I don't know if you can put this in the clip when we edit this, but it looked like a Muslim person praying.
Correct.
Because it was exactly the same action. They would stand up,
Right.
bend their knees down, and then bow their heads on the floor.
That's right.
And I think it's a really powerful way to pray because it's a constant reminder that you are nothing.
Correct. Literally.
Everything you are is because of the bounty of God.
Yeah.
And a lot of people ask me, dude, you're a Muslim. How do you pray 5 times a day?
Sure.
And the more regular I've become in my prayers,
Yeah.
I'm like, it makes sense because as humans, we're so forgetful.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we do something that's really good and that benefits people or like we're productive, we're like, yo, I did this.
Yeah,
like when I go up on stage and I kill on stage and I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, dude, I'm
Yeah.
so funny.
Yeah.
And then you get a humble reminder the next day when you bomb. But
That's right.
as humans, we
You
need
can take a break to remind yourself.
right,
Yeah.
we need constant reminders
Sure.
to be like, oh my God, none of this is because of me. It's because of the ability God gave me.
Right.
And it makes sense why we have to do it 5 times a day, multiple times, bowing your head.
Yeah.
And it allows you to truly recognize, and I'm struggling with this still. I'm not saying I'm perfect to that state. It allows you to have that concept of letting go a little bit because you're accepting it's not in my hands.
Right.
It's in God's hands.
Yep.
And through him, I'm doing whatever it is that I'm doing. And it's only going to be for a short period of time. Because in your prayers, you're constantly saying that life of this world is short-lived. You're praying for your parents. You're praying for your generations to come. And it's just a humble reminder to keep you going as a human.
Right.
And not get carried away with arrogance. Because a lot of times, confidence in yourself can turn into that. And that obviously is not good for you.
A good friend of mine just became a judge recently. He's in New Jersey. And I just met him, afterwards and just, hey, how's it going? How's it feel like being a judge? He's like, man, I'm so lucky I'm a Muslim. I'm like, why? He's like, when you become a judge, he's like, you have to understand, I walk into the room and people have to stand. He's like, they have to show me respect. They have to say your honor. He's like, they're literally tooting my horn so much. He's like, it isn't until I take that break and I go into prostration that I remind myself, oh, shoot, I'm a human. I'm not God, because they make you feel like you're God. And he's like, I have to do this 5 times a day. He's like, it literally gives me that humble reminder of like the real essence of life.
God is the best of judges.
God, exactly. He's like, otherwise, man, they get to your head really quickly.
Yeah.
So.
That's an interesting take. I think it could be, I don't know, because praying, I understand, I see the beauty in it.
Yeah.
But I think it's easy to remind yourself without the actual prayer.
Sure.
Yeah,
So here's the other part of it. A lot of mental health videos and so they'll tell you that you should take 3 to 5 15-minute breaks in the day just to survive in the current climate.
Mental health. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Health,
okay.
Right? Just to meditate, for example, or to consume, just sit and relax or whatever. And what's amazing is it already is intertwined in a Muslim to force yourself to have those breaks anyways, right? And to your point, yes, you can sit there and ponder, but by having a structured prayer, what the advantage of that is that in each position, if you understand why you're in those positions, you actually are able to, I guess, escape into a deeper trance. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
When you're in prostration,
yeah,
the word you say is Subhana Rabbi al-Ala, which means holy is God, who is the most high.
Okay.
But you yourself are in the lowest state you could possibly be. Like if I were to lay down, it wouldn't be as humbling as to prostrate. Like prostrate, just that weird position. It puts you in that humble state.
Yeah.
And so in that state, after you say this a few times and you reflect on the fact that you're in this humbling state, that's when you pray in whatever words and language you want to. You then pour your heart out. And I've prayed with other people, and I'm doing my own prayer, daydreaming about the basketball game or whatever, and the person next to me is just bawling, like just pouring their heart out. And many times I'm like, wow, just having that feeling. He's like, it's almost like like a kettle is burning or whatever. It feels almost like that. And then when you get up, they get up, and then they're able to snap back into life.
Really?
which is amazing because then they gave themselves that 5, 10, 15 minutes. They poured their heart out. They got everything out, their emotions. And now they're done. They've gotten out of that experience. They're able to go back into the world and conquer it, which is something that many of us need. You need that time to take a break and just drink that one glass of water to just cope with some of the news we hear and the issues we hear. So I think, to your point, you're right. You don't have to do that. But those who have experienced it, even those who are not Muslims, have experienced the prostration itself. It has a very weird, profound experience.
No, there's definitely beauty in it. I can appreciate that for sure.
What was your off topic? Yeah, go for it.
Off topic, okay. Oh, somebody's here. It's okay. So the last question I do have is, who corrupted the Bible if it were to be corrupted?
Human beings.
Human beings.
And I'll explain why.
Okay, can we take one pause?
Yeah, of course.
Yes. Okay, can you give me about 10 minutes? Sure. Okay, I'm doing a podcast right now. Okay, sorry. It's okay. Yeah. Can I inspect it or? Yeah, you give me about 10 minutes. Okay. I'll open the back if you want to pull it up. Oh yeah, pull it. Okay.
Yeah, edit it out.
You should keep it in.
Do you need to open the back right now?
No.
For him? Okay.
Okay, I'm just gonna start.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So the off topic is, who corrupted the Bible if it were to be corrupted?
Okay. The answer is that every single book on the face of this earth since time immemorial has always ended in corruption. Meaning, there's no book that has ever survived the test of time. Ever. Bible included. Except the Holy Quran. And the reason I say that is a very strong statement to make, and I'll back it up. And that is that the Holy Quran is the only book that, one, declares it will be safeguarded.
Yeah.
God promises he will. And number two, it just so happened that in the last 1400 years, when the Holy Quran was revealed, people did two things. One is they wrote it down immediately. And number two, they memorized it. Even till this day, there are millions of people who have the entire Holy Quran memorized. Mind you, the Holy Quran is only 1/3 the size of the Bible. Okay? But they were able to memorize it. And I have some friends, Hafiz Musa, for example, he's memorized the entire thing. Now, why that's powerful is because when the Holy Quran is being revealed, let's say Ibrahim memorizes it.
Yeah.
Right? And you and I have written copies. And we change our written copies to corrupt it. We can't change what's in his mind.
Okay.
Because it's been memorized. And not just by him, by 1,000 other people. We would have to go to each person and say,
millions
no, by the
other
way,
people, right? Yeah.
Right, change this at that very time, early on, right? And so that helped the Holy Quran remain intact. Whereas in the Bible has always been a written form, different languages, compiled at different places, different eras, being put piecemeal. For example, there was the Council of Nicaea, just to give you one example, which was a council that collected, I think it was 53 Gospels. And if I'm not mistaken, again, we can double check this before you put it on air, but they had decided which ones do we include into the Gospel? There are 53 of them. What do we do with them? So they said, okay, you know what? Let's leave them on a table. Tomorrow when we come back, whatever's still on the table will be part of the Gospels, and the rest will throw them away.
Right.
Fine, great. The next morning they came and only four Gospels were there. The rest had fallen. Which means that there could be potentially a lot more of the Gospels that we don't even know about. So where are those? That, like, omission itself is a corruption.
Yes.
Right? Where you don't know what else is there.
Okay.
Or another version of corruption is that the versions change. For example, in each Gospel, they don't have the same stories. They don't have the same details. They're different. Or there are other places where in the Old Testament, for example, where people say for example, the Old Testament, they'll say it is revealed by Moses, right? That these are the words that God spoke to Moses, and Moses gave us. But there's a verse in there that says, and then Moses was buried in a place called Moab. That means Moses didn't reveal it. Moses has already been buried, right, at this point. So who wrote it? They don't know. So just by the fact that you don't know can allow for corruption to exist. Right?
I see.
So there are studies, and historians have their versions of who wrote this and who added this, and they have different studies on it. There are countless huge Concordian Bibles or whatever that you can purchase and find out.
Mm.
And so I guess the word, when we use corruption, may offend some people, and we're not doing it with the intention of discarding the Holy Bible, because what they forget is that I cannot be a Muslim if I don't believe in the Bible.
Mm.
I must believe in the Bible to be a Muslim.
Right.
But I also believe the fact that Buddha, for example, is also a prophet of God, and the words that he brought are also from God. And I believe Krishna, for example, was also a prophet of God. The only difference is none of those books and none of those teachings and none of those prophets were universal and were for to exist till end of time. The only thing I believe was to do that was the Holy Quran, which is why it never changed and it remains intact even today. To give you an example, in Islam, every Muslim believes the exact same Holy Quran.
Yeah.
Every Muslim believes in the same creed. We have the same version of God. We have the same version of what the Holy Prophet Muhammad is. He's
Peace be on him.
Whereas in every Christian denomination does not agree with what Jesus is. Period. Hands down. If you go to more than 3 churches, you will see a different version of Jesus. They don't even agree on what Jesus is. They're Unitarians. They believe Jesus is not God. Seventh-day Adventists, they have their own version of what Jesus is. He's a personification, whatever it is, right? He's not directly a son of God. Mormons have their version. Catholics have their version. So even just the basic premise of Jesus is not universal in Christianity. Whereas in Islam doesn't have that difference. It's very, very, and the reason for that is because various parts of the Bible are kind of cherry picked. And they say, okay, because of this is what we believe, this is what we believe. And that's why I believe that Christians may get offended, but they shouldn't, not from a Muslim.
Because we're not saying they knowingly believe in something that's corrupted.
It's a test of time. Correct.
For instance, like you believe Bible is the word of God. Like Charles, who we had on the podcast, he
Sure.
believes that it's veracity, which
Sure.
we're not saying you're
Yeah.
malicious. We're just
Sure,
saying somehow down the line, people, because of human error, not because of God or
Exactly.
Jesus,
Exactly.
it's purely because of humans that the words got manipulated in a sense where they were not meant to be. But before we end, I wanted to ask you, because Charles brought it up, right?
Yeah.
He gave the example of Hazrat Umar,
Okay.
where he burned down all the different versions that were there. So I told him, and I don't fully remember what I told him, but from what I can think, I told him that Hazrat Umar did that because there were different, like, people spoke in different vernacular, even for the time of Arabia. Even for the time, the Quran was in a language that was like very formal.
Okay.
And so to avoid different interpretations and different versions, Hazrat Umar kept one singular one and he burned down all the other ones. Now, what is, because I am not fully aware what happened.
Sure.
So what is that historical incident and what happened in that?
So whenever a Muslim says the Holy Quran was never changed, they will go to this example of a Quran being burned, as if this will make their claim. Number one, no Christian can ever refute the fact that the Holy Quran was memorized from day one until now. And if it's memorized, you can never change somebody's memory, number one. Number two, why were they burned and what was burned? Number one, the Holy Quran was standardized at the life of the Holy Prophet. When he was still alive,
Peace be on.
on whom be peace, the Holy Quran was standardized. It was revised. In fact, the last year of his life, Angel Gabriel came in the month of Ramadan, the fasting month, and revised the entire Holy Quran twice.
Okay.
And made sure that whatever version was is it. This is it, right? And not only he, but all the disciples would also recite the entire Holy Quran multiple times in that same month, in order for us to make sure we're all on the same page, number one. Number two, once it was standardized, what the Holy Prophet also allowed was that there were different tribes who had different dialects. You know, the vernacular you're mentioning, they had different dialects. So it's the same Arabic, but it's spoken slightly different. Imagine it like Scottish English and Australian English, and then we have British English, then we have American English. Think of it exactly like that. At the time of the Prophet, all 4 of those versions of the Quran existed. And they existed for a few years until Usman's time, the 3rd Caliph. When he came, he realized that if all 4 of these exist, it'll become the same as the version of the Bible, where we have the King James Version, New King James Version, right? We have various versions. So he said, no, we already have a standard Quraysh version that everybody knows was the exact revealed word of God. These are just dialects of that version. Let's eliminate the dialects So we eliminate this confusion.
Yeah.
So he ordered all of those to be collected and burned.
So it's Osman, not Hazrat Umar.
This has Osman.
Okay.
And those were only the other dialects, not the standardized version. All he did was further standardize it. That this is the Holy Quran. And the same Holy Quran that he possessed at that time, where he was actually, when he was murdered, or when he was assassinated, that Holy Quran exists in a museum today. It has his blood on it. It's the same words as the Holy Quran you and I read today.
So tell me, so how I understand it, there's different versions of Quran at the time, different dialects to help people understand
from those tribes. Correct.
Because they didn't understand the
British,
nuances.
Correct. Just like an American.
And Hazrat Usman was like, it's going to be hard for you to understand the standard version, but I'm going to keep every single article the same exact way as it's been since the Holy Prophet's time, peace be on him.
Correct.
And to maintain the authenticity of the Quran, like you said, you're
just going to standardize it. That's it.
That was a great decision because for 1,400 years, there's over 60 sects in Islam, maybe more.
Correct.
But every single sect has
plus,
70 plus, but every single sect has the exact same from start to finish, same Quran, same alphabet, same characters, same everything.
Yeah, correct.
Which is a beautiful thing, right? Yeah. So that's what distinguishes it from other books.
Correct.
That came before.
Other books were not free from that, while as in the Holy Quran was able to secure that it was safe.
Now there's different interpretations.
Yeah. Sure.
But the text, original text of itself,
the
prophecy of God to promise that to the Quran has been fulfilled so far.
Absolutely.
And hopefully God willing.
Yeah, people like this. People are still memorizing it today.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Well, thank you. That was very insightful.
Thank you as well.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on.
I don't think it would last as long, but
No, sir. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate it as well.
Hopefully, I would mention this to him. I'm not super versed, right? So it would be amazing to see a pastor or priest come on and then have a conversation.
Yep. Wants to debate.
No, not a debate.
Gen Z speaks first debate.
Answer questions for me too in the Bible, right? Because he
sure.
probably has his interpretation of the Quran. You probably have interpretation of the Bible, and maybe there's a difference there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mom.
Thank you, man.
Thank you as well.
Coming
Thank
on.
you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.